Have you ever wondered if the image of Jesus Christ we've all seen is a lie? What if the Vatican has hidden the true face of Jesus from us for centuries? For over 2 millennia, the image of Jesus Christ has been a beacon of hope, faith, and redemption for billions around the world. His likeness adorns stained glass windows, graces cathedral domes, and finds a revered place in sacred art within homes and places of worship. The widespread depiction of Jesus as a fair-skinned, light-haired man with European features has long been a subject of debate. Recent scholarship by academics, theologians, and historians reveals evidence that puts this portrayal into question. Given that Jesus was born in the Judea, his actual appearance would most likely have looked nothing like the Eurocentric image that has been imprinted on people's minds. The idea of a black Jesus both questions the historic validity of such portrayals and challenges the Church to reassess its complicity in perpetuating colonialist narratives of racial hierarchies. Examining how the Church has shaped Christ's image and erased diversity in religious narratives. Acknowledging black Jesus suggests a profound cultural shift, intertwining race and spirituality within America's complex history of systemic racism. This may at last be a seminal moment for the Vatican to make amends with its past. But what could this presage for the future of Christianity and the worldwide pursuit of racial equality? History has seen popes play decisive roles in shaping religious discourses. Pope Nicholas V, for example, issued the papal bull Dum Diversas in 1452, authorizing the enslavement of non-Christians. This papal edict served as a foundation for justifying European colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade, creating racial hierarchies that became embedded in society. Another infamous figure was Pope Alexander VI. Accused of corruption and promoting his family, he promulgated the Intercitera Bull in 1493. These gave Spain and Portugal both the right to colonize America and spread Christianity to it. This papal bull further solidified, among other things, the ties that bound European superiority and supremacy with religious authority, creating a wide erasing of cultures and histories for Native Americans. Pope Paul III had supported the doctrine of discovery, a series of papal bulls legitimizing the colonization of non-Christian lands and subjugation of its people. Much later, he issued the Bull Sublimis Deus in 1537 to condemn the enslavement of indigenous peoples. The initial support for colonization had already set a precedent for centuries of exploitation and oppression. These papal actions not only gave Christianity a wider reach but also strengthened the visual and cultural hegemony of the Eurocentric representation of holy figures, thus influencing the global concepts and portrayals of Jesus Christ. If you're feeling this journey so far, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reflections on how the Vatican has shaped narratives surrounding race in the comments below. We're just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The image of Jesus we know today, with his pale skin and blue eyes, didn't just happen by chance. It's a story that's been meticulously crafted over centuries, shaped by the forces of cultural power, religious control, and colonial aspirations. This evolution of Jesus's portrayal in art reveals intricate ties among theology, politics, and the arts that have influenced the way we see racial and cultural hierarchies. When we look back at the earliest days of Christianity, Jesus was depicted in a variety of ways that mirrored the diverse populations of the Mediterranean and Near Eastern regions. In the Roman catacombs, you'll find artwork showing Jesus as a young, beardless shepherd, a universal symbol of protection and guidance. Other portrayals give him dark skin and curly hair, a nod to his actual Semitic roots in that time and place. In the early days of Christianity, Jesus was imagined and depicted in various ways, deeply inspired by the local artistic expressions of the diverse communities that embraced the faith. He transcended racial and cultural boundaries, appearing as a divine figure that resonated with the unique characteristics of each region. However, as Christianity grew in prominence and became the state religion of the Roman Empire in the 4th century, this rich tapestry of representation began to change. Under Emperor Constantine's Edict of Milan and the guidance of the First Council of Nicaea, there was a concerted effort to standardize the religion's doctrine and iconography. The Church aimed to create a singular image of Christ that would embody the power and authority associated with Roman leaders. This transformation was not only theological, but also visual, with Jesus being increasingly portrayed in a way that aligned with the dominant Roman cultural norms. The Renaissance was a turning point in cementing the image of a white Jesus. Renowned artists like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and Raphael, who were often commissioned by the church and wealthy patrons, imbued Jesus with European features, such as fair skin, light hair, and blue eyes. This was a reflection of the era's prevalent beauty ideals, which were deeply rooted in Greco-Roman aesthetics and the widespread influence of European culture. Their masterpieces, such as Michelangelo's Last Judgment and Leonardo's The Last Supper, played a significant role in embedding this Eurocentric portrayal of Jesus in the minds of Christians worldwide. These artistic choices were not merely personal interpretations, they were actively promoted by the Church's institutional power, which recognized the profound impact that visual representations could have on people's spiritual and cultural perceptions. This standardized image served as a powerful symbol, reinforcing the Church's own authority and the dominance of European culture within Christian worship. Over time, this depiction of Jesus became almost universally accepted, despite its stark departure from the African or the Middle Eastern context in which he actually lived. During the Age of Exploration, as Europe expanded its reach into Africa, Asia, and the Americas, the image of Jesus underwent a significant transformation. This period coincided with the whitening of Jesus, a shift that served as a profound tool for the Church and colonizers. The Church played a pivotal role in this era of expansion, acting as a cornerstone for European powers. The introduction of a white Jesus to these new lands symbolized the perceived superiority of European culture and religious beliefs, which were used to justify the suppression of native cultures and their rich spiritual and artistic heritages. This altered portrayal had a profound impact on indigenous communities, disconnecting them from their own identities and reinforcing a racial hierarchy where whiteness was linked to divine purity and civilization, while darker skin was associated with barbarism and inferiority. For the enslaved Africans transported to the Americas, this white Jesus embodied a complex message. On one hand, he offered the promise of salvation and spiritual solace amidst the horrors of slavery. Yet, on the other hand, this image was weaponized by slave owners to maintain control. They used the white Jesus to argue that their institution was divinely sanctioned, preaching a theology of subservience that claimed obedience to earthly masters was a heavenly commandment. This racialized depiction of Jesus thus became the face of an oppressive system, a symbol that upheld the racial hierarchies that underpinned slavery, and reinforced the notion that whiteness equaled power and moral superiority. The Vatican's role in these narratives is multifaceted, comprising both direct and indirect complicity. As the epicenter of the Catholic Church, it wielded substantial power over Christian doctrine and iconography. Although some individual popes and Vatican officials spoke out against particular injustices, the institution often remained silent, or even provided active support for colonial ventures and the dominance of European culture. The doctrine of discovery, a set of papal bulls from the 15th century, exemplifies this complicity. These decrees essentially gave European monarchs the religious and legal mandate to claim non-Christian lands. This laid the groundwork for colonialism and supported the notion that the spread of Christianity, and by extension, the white image of Jesus, went hand in hand with European supremacy. It allowed for the ruthless exploitation of indigenous peoples and further entrenched the idea that Christianity was synonymous with European power and control. The spread of a white Jesus to colonized lands was a deliberate act of erasing native spirituality and identity. In places like Africa, the Americas, and parts of Asia, missionaries frequently obliterated indigenous religious symbols, constructing European-style churches, with images of a white Christ instead. This visual dominance subtly taught the colonized that Europe was the epitome of civilization and holiness. The Vatican, as the beating heart of Catholicism, played a significant role in this cultural imperialism, influencing how race and divinity, are perceived worldwide even today. In modern times, the Vatican's historical part in these racial narratives is still evident. Jesus is commonly imagined as white, which shapes our view of race and spirituality. Any attempt to present a black or non-European Jesus often faces opposition, highlighting the deep-rooted power of colonial constructs. The Vatican's hesitance to fully confront and address its past complicity in these narratives only slows the progress of dismantling racial hierarchies. However, there have been moments of realization and calls for change. Movements like liberation theology, in mid-20th century Latin America, sought to integrate Christian principles with social justice, often embracing Jesus images that mirrored the lives of the marginalized. This theological approach aimed to give voice to the oppressed. Similarly, in the US, Black theology reframed Jesus as an emblem of Black freedom, reclaiming his image from oppressive connotations. Yet the Vatican has not fully grappled with the implications of its past role in shaping racial narratives. The persistent dominance of the white Jesus serves as a stark reminder of the Church's complicity in racial and cultural subjugation. To move forward, the Church must acknowledge these historical wrongs and actively advocate for a more inclusive and realistic portrayal of Jesus, reflecting the rich tapestry of the global Christian community. In conclusion, the Vatican's historical role in shaping the narrative of a white Jesus has had lasting effects. This image has been used from early Christian times through the peak of European colonialism to uphold racial and cultural hierarchies. To foster a more inclusive and empathetic understanding of faith, it's essential to challenge this narrative. By doing so, we honor the diversity within Christian tradition and the shared humanity that connects us all. What a Black Jesus revelation means, to acknowledge that Jesus might have been Black, is way more than a footnote, either in academic or theological life. It represents a revolution in the understanding and practicing of Christianity. This challenges the deeply entrenched narratives that had long placed Europe at the spiritual and cultural center of this faith. A Black Jesus would be returning Christianity to its proper historical and geographical roots. It would make the tradition more inclusive, equitable, and justice-oriented. Theologically, the idea of a Black Jesus confronts centuries of Eurocentric dogma that have molded Christian doctrine and practice. The historical Jesus was a Jew, born in Roman-occupied Palestine, a region steeped in Middle Eastern and African influences. Recognizing this reality reorients Christianity away from the whitewashed narrative that has dominated its history, and reconnects the faith with its original context. This shift would stress the universality of Jesus' message, as it situated him within a specific cultural and historical backdrop, which was systematically suppressed in favor of European narratives. Making Jesus Black would amount to fundamentally revisiting and redeveloping the way in which the Church has hitherto understood and communicated key dogmatic theology. For example, one might consider Imago Dei, this notion of the image of God in human beings, anew. A Black God incarnate would affirm the dignity and divine reflection inherently within Black bodies, which would be a direct rebuttal to centuries of theology used to justify racism and colonialism. Such a vision would encourage Christians to adopt an expanded understanding of God, beyond racial and cultural confines. The representation of Jesus Christ as Black also resonates with the movement known as liberation theology. This theology reads the gospel message through the prism of human justice and the lived realities of the poor and downtrodden. It views Jesus as one who identifies himself in solidarity with the marginalized peoples and in that sense challenges the oppressive regimes. A Black Jesus becomes the embodiment of this thought, serving as a mighty symbol of resistance against entrenched injustice. It will be a theological shift that affirms the lived realities of poor, deprived communities and calls the global Church to repentance and action on contemporary inequality. The cultural implications of recognizing a Black Jesus are equally profound. Centuries have passed with the image of a white Jesus, symbolizing cultural dominance, reinforcing racial hierarchies that marginalize non-European peoples. Conversely, a Black Jesus would dislodge these hierarchies and challenge the power structures that have been beneficiaries of the erasure of non-European contributions to Christianity. For African Americans and other communities of African descent, a black Jesus would serve as a powerful affirmation of their identity and place within the Christian narrative. Historically, black Christians have navigated a complex relationship with their faith, which has often been used both as a tool of oppression and as a source of liberation. Recognizing black Jesus would, in essence, validate the theological insights of the black church, which long has lifted up themes of liberation, justice, and resilience. It would affirm that black lives and experiences are not peripheral to the Christian story, but central to it. This shift would also push predominantly white congregations to confront their own biases and assumptions about race and faith. The whitewashing of Jesus has allowed many Christians to view their faith through a lens of cultural superiority, often unconsciously perpetuating racial stereotypes and inequalities. A black Jesus would disrupt this narrative, inviting white Christians to re-examine their understanding of Jesus and his teachings. Though uncomfortable, this process would call one to greater humility and repentance, yet it is a potential catalyst toward greater unity and understanding within the church. The revelation of a black Jesus carries revolutionary potential, particularly in its capacity to inspire movements for social and racial justice. Throughout history, images and symbols have played a powerful role in shaping collective identity and motivating action. A black Jesus, as a symbol of resistance and liberation, could galvanize efforts to confront systemic oppression both within and outside the church. A black Jesus, scripturally, would encourage reinterpretations that center on themes of justice, equality, and solidarity with the oppressed. Passages like Luke 4 verses 18 to 19, where Jesus proclaims his mission, to bring good news to the poor and set the oppressed free, would take on renewed significance. These themes, deeply rooted in the black church tradition, align with the lived experiences of many marginalized communities, and could inspire Christians to engage more actively in the work of justice. Recognizing a black Jesus would also challenge the church to address racial inequality more proactively. For too long, many Christian institutions have been complicit in perpetuating systemic racism, either through silence or direct participation. Reimagining Jesus as black would require grappling with this history and committing to dismantling the structures that continue to perpetuate inequality. This could manifest in tangible actions such as advocating for criminal justice reform, addressing economic disparities, and confronting racism within the church itself. Beyond the church, a black Jesus could serve as a unifying symbol for broader social movements. During the civil rights movement, for example, the black church played a central role in organizing and galvanizing activists, often drawing on the image of a Christ who suffered and triumphed for the sake of justice. Similarly, a black Jesus associated with struggle and resilience can galvanize contemporary movements for racial and social justice into hope and determination to change the deeply entrenched systems of oppression. Not surprisingly, the acceptance of black Jesus would be resisted for various reasons, especially by those interested in maintaining the status quo of affairs. To many, the question of a white Jesus image goes deep into their faith and system of life, even to the concept of cultural identity. At that level, it would go deeper into touching deeply rooted beliefs and prejudices, possibly painfully and transformingly so. Yet, the chance of growth and healing attendant to this is great. A black Jesus offers a more inclusive and historically accurate vision of Christianity, one that celebrates the diversity of the global church. It calls Christians to embody the radical inclusivity of Jesus' teachings, tearing down barriers that divide people based on race, culture, or nationality. In conclusion, the revelation of a black Jesus means much more than the change of iconography. It is a call to reimagine Christianity itself. It challenges the church to confront its complicity in systems of oppression, embrace a more inclusive and justice-oriented faith, and reconnect with the historical and cultural roots of the Christian story. For marginalized communities, it offers affirmation and empowerment, reclaiming their place at the heart of the Christian narrative. For the broader church, it is an invitation to repentance, transformation, and a renewed commitment to the work of justice. A black Jesus, as a symbol of liberation and hope, may thus inspire a more authentic and transformative Christianity, one that truly reflects the universal message of love, justice, and equality at the heart of the gospel. The concept of a Black Jesus holds immense cultural, spiritual, and societal relevance for an American audience. The United States has long invariably viewed the intersection of race, religion, and power as a space of struggle and change. From the civil rights movement to the present debates over systemic racism, religion has been used both as an agent of oppression and as a strong tool for liberation. Acknowledging a Black Jesus within this context presents an opportunity to confront entrenched narratives, reconcile faith with justice, and bring healing to a divided society. Christianity in the United States shares a deeply connected history with the nation's racial dynamics. Enslaved Africans brought to America were often forcibly converted to Christianity, a faith presented to them through the lens of white supremacy. The image of white Jesus was used to reinforce racial hierarchies, teaching that obedience to white masters was divinely ordained. This theological manipulation justified slavery and segregation, embedding racial inequality into the fabric of American religious life. But Black Americans did not passively accept this imposed narrative. From the very beginning, they reinterpreted Christianity through their own experiences, emphasizing themes of liberation, justice, and resilience. In time, the Black church emerged as a hub in the African American communities. A place not only of worship but also one for education, political organization, and social support. Throughout the history of the Black church, Jesus is usually pictured as one who resisted or, to an extent, showed solidarity with the oppressed, as mainstream imagery continued to make him out to be white. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s is one such powerful example of this reinterpretation. Leaders such as Martin Luther King, with roots in the Black church tradition, drew upon the example of Jesus as a source of inspiration and strength in the struggle against injustice. The vision of Jesus as a liberator who stood against systems of oppression resonated deeply with the fight for equality. And yet, as the movement won major victories, the broader cultural picture of a white Jesus remained unchallenged, reflecting the enduring grasp of Eurocentric Christianity on the American imagination. In contemporary America, acknowledgement of a Black Jesus aligns with the ongoing struggle for racial justice. Movements like Black Lives Matter have refocused the nation's attention on systemic racism embedded within American institutions, calling for a reckoning with symbols and systems that perpetuate inequality. The image of a white Jesus, one of the most enduring symbols of whiteness in Western culture, is an important part of this conversation. A Black Jesus challenges white supremacy at both a cultural and theological level. It confronts the assumption that divinity and purity are inherently linked to whiteness, offering a powerful counternarrative in the name of affirming the humanity and dignity of Black people. This reimagining of Jesus disrupts the racial hierarchies that have long been reinforced by Christian imagery, calling Americans to reevaluate their understanding of faith, race, and power. It would be a very affirming and empowering moment for many African Americans when a Black Jesus is acknowledged. It would confirm the theological acumen of the Black church tradition, which has held fast over the years to Jesus in solidarity with the marginalized. It also corrects the historical erasure of Black contributions to Christianity, affirming that Black lives and experiences are integral to the Christian story. This would challenge white Christians to confront their own biases and assumptions too. The whitewashing of Jesus has allowed many to think of Christianity as a faith inherently aligned with European culture and values, often at the exclusion of others. To recognize Jesus as Black is to disrupt this narrative and to invite white Christians into a more inclusive, historically informed vision of their faith. The process may be painful but could serve to further understanding and solidarity across racial lines. The churches in America are poised to take the lead in embracing the revelation of a Black Jesus by adopting more inclusive imagery and teachings. They are to model a process whereby one can come to uncomfortable truths, and out of those, work for justice and equity in society. Such would not only strengthen their witness but also build bridges to those communities that have long felt alienated from the church. One concrete way churches can do this is by placing a variety of representations of Jesus in their worship spaces and educational materials. Paintings, statues, and stained glass windows of a black Jesus will be strong visual reminders of the multicultural roots of Christianity and its commitment to justice. These images allow congregants to reimagine their faith in ways that celebrate diversity and challenge racial hierarchies. Churches can also engage in theological education that explores the historical and cultural context of Jesus' life. Sermons, Bible studies, and workshops can delve into the Semitic and African influences on early Christianity, offering a more accurate and inclusive understanding of the faith. By addressing the ways in which Christian theology has been used to justify racism, churches can help congregants confront and dismantle these harmful legacies. Beyond internal reflection, American churches can actively be agents for racial justice in their communities. This could include partnering with organizations committed to fighting systemic inequality, supporting policy work that advances equity, and participating in social movements. A black Jesus, as a symbol of resistance and liberation, may spur churches to make their actions congruent with the values of justice and compassion at the heart of the gospel. The acknowledgement of a black Jesus has the potential to foster healing in a divided society. For African Americans and other marginalized groups, it affirms their place within the Christian narrative, offering a vision of faith that is inclusive and empowering. For white Christians, the book is an opportunity to come to terms with how their faith has been deformed by white privilege and to expand their imagination around Jesus' message. At the same time, this can act as a bridge between the church and the world. Younger Americans, who have been largely disillusioned by the appearance of the church's complicities in systemic injustice, are looking for a faith that is authentic, inclusive, and justice-oriented. A black Jesus does align with these values, and offers a vision of Christianity relevant to contemporary struggles for equality and human rights. Moreover, the acknowledgement of a black Jesus has the potential to bring more unity within the church itself. By celebrating the diversity of the Christian tradition, churches can transcend the kinds of divisions that have often marked American Christianity. Such unity, rooted in a shared commitment to justice and inclusivity, may witness to a society riddled by polarization and conflict. The acknowledgement of a black Jesus is an opportunity for deep transformation. It contests the white supremacy that is deeply entrenched in the narratives of Christianity, affirms the dignity and humanity of marginalized groups, and calls all believers to a more just and inclusive faith. For America, so deeply shaped at the junctures of race, religion, and power, this revelation offers hope for healing and reconciliation in a divided society. This path ahead is one of accountability, transformation, and hope, a path that has the potential to reshape the church and its relationship with the world. As evidence supporting a more historically accurate and diverse depiction of Jesus continues to grow, calls for accountability from the Vatican are becoming increasingly urgent. Activists, theologians, and scholars are pressing the church to confront its role in perpetuating racial hierarchy through religious imagery, doctrine, and historical complicity. For centuries, the image of a white Jesus has reinforced cultural and racial dominance, distorting the universality of Christianity. Now, many argue it's time for the Vatican to stop passive acknowledgement and actively take responsibility for its part in this legacy. The first step toward accountability is for the Vatican to acknowledge its role in shaping and perpetuating racialized depictions of Jesus. Throughout history, the Church has supported and spread artistic portrayals that reflect European ideals of beauty, power, and divinity. This was institutionalized through papal patronage and disseminated throughout the world through missionary activity, often in ways that destroyed local traditions and furthered Eurocentric dominance. Owning up to this means, the Vatican must openly admit its complicity in colonialism and the racialization of Christianity. The doctrine of discovery, sanctioned by papal bulls in the 15th century, justified the subjugation of non-European peoples and contributed to the intertwining of Christianity with imperial conquest. Such recognition is a necessary step towards starting a reconciliation process with communities marginalized and harmed by these narratives. One important thing that the Vatican could do would be to create new religious art representative of the diverse global Christian community. For centuries, Christian art has portrayed Jesus and other biblical figures as Europeans, often to the exclusion of other cultural and historical realities. By encouraging artists from a variety of backgrounds to produce works depicting Jesus with features consistent with his African origins, the Vatican will be in a position to illustrate its commitment to inclusivity and historical accuracy visually. These representations would honor the multicultural roots of Christianity while affirming the dignity and humanity of all people. These works would become powerful symbols of a church that embraced diversity and repudiated the racial hierarchies of its past imagery, showing them in prominent displays in St. Peter's Basilica. The Vatican museums, or elsewhere in the Vatican, would demonstrate an actual change in how the Church handles representation and diversity. The Vatican has to be more proactive in theological education regarding the racial dimensions of Christianity. Seminaries and religious institutions bear the responsibility of shaping the views of future priests, theologians, and church leaders. Incorporating discussions about the historical, cultural, and racial contexts of Jesus' life into their curricula would better equip religious leaders to thoughtfully engage with issues of race and representation. This should also include an education regarding the historical complicity of the Church in colonialism and racism, nurturing a spirit of critical reflection and repentance. Future leaders must be prepared to address the ongoing consequences of these legacies and advocate for a more inclusive and justice-oriented faith. The engagement of these discourses would further be enriched if it encourages dialogue with scholars and theologians from marginalized communities, to allow diverse perspectives into the shaping of church leaders. Accountability cannot come without due transparency. Opening of archives by the Vatican will facilitate the research needed in its complicity in colonialism, racialization of Christianity, and propagation of Eurocentric religious imagery. In doing so, it will arm the historian, theologian, and activist with material needed to make sense of and find responses to the full implications of such an effect from the Church on racial narratives. More importantly, it is through this kind of transparency that reconciliation may begin with those communities who suffered under such a narrative. Listening to the voices of those who have experienced exclusion and marginalization within the Church is a crucial step in fostering healing and rebuilding trust. The Vatican could create spaces for dialogue and collaboration, working alongside these communities to develop initiatives that promote justice, inclusivity, and mutual understanding. The Black Jesus revelation is not merely a matter of historical accuracy. It represents a profound challenge to the racial and cultural assumptions that have framed Christianity for many centuries. For the Vatican, dealing with this revelation would mean a willingness to face its complicity in such narratives and to take bold steps toward reconciliation and inclusivity. This is not simply a symbolic act but a moral and spiritual one, speaking to the very heart of the Church's mission. The implications are just as deep for American Christians. Accepting a Black Jesus represents an opportunity to reconcile faith with the ideals of justice and equality, to make Christianity relevant again in today's struggle for racial justice. This could be a transformative moment for this country, still wrestling with the legacies of slavery and segregation, in which the Church and society would embrace a more inclusive and honest version of Christianity. Ultimately, reckoning with the racial history of Christianity is not to make faith shallow, but to deepen it through an embracing of the truth about who Jesus was and what he represents. This opens the path on which Christians can create a faith that speaks to the needs of a diverse, interconnected world. The question now is whether the Vatican will rise to the challenge. If so, will American Christians seize this moment to lead the way in redefining what it means to follow Christ in the 21st century? Accountability, transformation, and hope mark the path forward, one that can change the very face of the Church and its relationship with the world.